So my name is Marina Brizar. I'm the UK Europe Director of Talent Beyond Boundaries. I'll talk a little bit about what we do and why I have this really prestigious seat among this incredible panel. But I will first start by sharing my story. So I was born in Sarajevo in Bosnia in the very late 80s. And it was just before the outbreak of the Civil War. My family were forced to flee. So my mum and my three brothers, we were smuggled into a refugee camp into Croatia. My dad ended up staying in the siege of Sarajevo, and we didn't see him for 4 years. So I grew up in a refugee camp with what was relatively a normal childhood, thanks to my mum. We were reunited and then moved to Australia, where we were offered humanitarian support through the UNHCR program, hence the Australian twang that I don't think will ever go away, and I'm kind of happy about that. So I studied immigration law and was really struck by this fact that managed migration systems are very siloed. You can come to another country on the basis of family or skill or humanitarian need, but never a combination. You can never be someone who is skilled and displaced, because the moment you're displaced, that takes precedence, and then that gives you a label. And so that led to doing a Churchill Fellowship in Displaced Talent Mobility and the work that we do at Talent Beyond Boundaries. So Talent Beyond Boundaries basically connects people who are living in displacement and brings them to a country of safety by virtue of their skills and skilled migration pathways. So it is not through a humanitarian stream, but once they arrive, they receive humanitarian support. Very proud to say that it's a pilot that is the newest but the biggest in the United Kingdom, the Displaced Talent Mobility pilot, with over 200 people here, predominantly from Lebanon and Jordan, so Palestinian, Syrian refugees, and the majority are nurses in the NHS. So I'll speak to Steve about that very shortly, because we have partnered on some work. But while I've got the floor, and before we start this really vivid conversation, I just wanted to, this time every year I reflect on this poem, if not more. It's a poem called Home, and it's by Warsan Shire. Some of you may have read it or heard about it, but she was a Somali refugee who came to the UK, and while sitting in a deportation centre reflected on the notions of home. So in her words, "No one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark. You only run for the border when you see the whole city running as well. Your neighbours running faster than you, breath bodily in their throats. The boy you went to school with who kissed you dizzy behind an old tin factory is now holding a gun bigger than his body. You only leave home when home won't let you stay. No one leaves home unless home chases you. Fire under feet, hot blood in your belly. It's not something you ever thought of doing until the blade burnt threats into your neck, and even then you carried the anthem under your breath, only tearing your passport in an airport toilet, sobbing at every mouthful of paper, made it clear that you won't be going back. You have to understand that no one puts their children in a boat unless the water is safer than the land." The poem continues, and I encourage you all to read it, but it's a really powerful way to start this conversation and to really highlight the incredible work that Dr. Umaima has done in launching a report about the obstacles that refugee women face in accessing employment, but integration into society in their destination countries. So to begin, we'd love to hear a little bit about your story, if you'd like to share it. And I think a question that I have is, what makes it most difficult for women to access employment? What are the barriers that stand out to you for that access?
Thank you so much, Marina, for this introduction, and thank you everyone for coming today and supporting us in this event. So my name is Umaima Mraif. I am a pro bono legal officer at DLA Piper, and I'm helping the team with all projects they are doing to support refugees and asylum seekers in the UK. And I am a refugee myself, so I was hired part of the firm policy to engage the right holders in their work. So I am a Libyan academic who came to the UK to finish higher education, and I was conducting research about prisoners' rights, especially female prisoners' rights, and what's happening in the criminal justice system in my country. And as a result of my research and the few articles I was writing about the violation of human rights and how female prisoners being treated in Libya and the criticisms I make, it become very risky and dangerous for me to go back to Libya. So I had no choice but to apply for asylum in the UK. I am a mother of 3 children, and I didn't want to take the risk, especially after receiving threats, and my life was at risk and wasn't safe at all. This moment was the hardest in my life because after the revolution happening in Libya in 2011, we thought that we are there. We will try to rebuild the country and having a new system, improving the justice system, but all of these dreams just went like that. So I found myself in a position that I need to start again in this country. I need to integrate and I need to work and provide for my family, take responsibility. It was a hard journey to integrate, but I am lucky enough to be here today, to be employed by DLA Piper, to be able to speak out and talk about the struggle of all women refugees. So going back to the report, Marina, so this is a report that I conducted to reflect the voice of women refugees. So we have interviewed 15 women refugees from UK, Germany, France, and Italy, and we give them the chance to speak about the barriers they face in terms of being able to integrate into the labor market in their host countries, and to give them space to speak about what really prevents them from achieving what they want or working in the right jobs they want. A number of barriers highlighted in the report, and many of them similar to each one of these women we spoke to. And as a professional woman, a person who considering myself well educated, what bothered me a lot that even for the professional women who have qualifications, PhDs or master degrees or work as engineers or doctors in their countries, it is still hard. And the main barrier, in my opinion, is the lack of tailored support. I'm talking here about professional support programs or initiatives that designed with the experiences and the needs of women refugees in mind, with the consideration of the complex challenges they face. I know from personal experience how hard it is to navigate and understand the professional environment in a new country, and how hard it is to deal with the unfair comparison between you and other people who were born and raised in this country, the unfair conditions within the labor market, let's say. So when I was granted my refugee status, I really wanted to do what I used to do in Libya, to teach law to undergraduate students. I was really keen and confident that I have the qualification, the long experience, but the reality was really shocking for me, because it seems that all of my applications were rejected, by the way. It was rarely for me to be shortlisted for any interviews. I was confused what's happening here. But it's obvious other candidates are stronger than me. They have publication record in English, they speak the language better than me, they understand the culture here, they have work experience in this country. For me, it wasn't the case, and I doubted myself. I started thinking about, I'm not good, maybe it's me, the problem with me. I was frustrated, sad, angry sometimes, honestly. What I needed at that time is a professional mentoring. I needed someone to help me managing my expectation. I needed someone to help me to have a better understanding of opportunities available in the professional environment for people like me, with my experience, with my duties as a mother, with the cultural differences that I'm trying to understand. I needed someone to help me articulate goals, identify training opportunities, getting work placements that will provide me with the local experience that I need in my CV to be accepted. I spent like a year struggling in the same circle until I find my way, and I am still grateful for the Refugee Council staff and for the course working in the UK and the support I received from them until I get this meaningful employment. So yes, I think the system is not sensitive to the needs of women refugees, not responsive enough. I think there is a gap in the services provided because this vulnerable group within the refugee community has different needs, and this should be considered.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think what's really powerful to take away is effectively, and you mentioned this in your report, the triple threat, or the intersection of three barriers that culminate for refugee women, and that is being a refugee, being a woman, and being someone who is culturally diverse or different in some way. And it's almost a cross to bear and makes perception really difficult. So you talked about the help of the Refugee Council. We're very pleased to have Renee here. It would be wonderful if you could talk to us a little bit about the Refugee Council and the services that are provided, but also to talk about the perception and how negative perceptions or connotations can be overcome.
Great. Hi, everybody. Yeah, of course. So Refugee Council, we've existed since 71, since the convention was created. And during that time, we've been providing employment services. But particularly in the last 25 years, we've really deepened the expertise and the holistic model that we provide for people in enabling them to be able to think through what their options are, to understand them and connect with those quality employment opportunities with employers. And that's really important because there are both structural barriers that people need to face in terms of housing, in terms of accessing benefits, the emotional impact of what people have been through, and really understanding the culture and how to access those opportunities. But equally, being able to cultivate the relationships with the right employers and to enable them to understand what they can do to be able to meet the needs of particularly women with professional expertise, and understanding what they can do to make those opportunities more accessible. And we're one of many in the field. You know, we may be the oldest refugee-specific organisation, but there are a lot of other organisations up and down the country who are leaning into and doing this work. Some are on the panel as well today. But what I would say as well, one of the things that we're live to in terms of perception is the chronic underfunding of that field. We receive less than 1% of the income, philanthropic income across the field, and you need that strong front line for refugee women to be able to, in particular, to be able to access the support that they need, and then be able to access the support, and access opportunities with employers. In terms of employers specifically, I just want to turn to what employers can do. You know, big corporates in particular have brands and they have a platform. There is a lot that you can say and do publicly that can shape and influence public opinion, but also government opinion as well. But businesses have different platforms to charities. Internally, if you're in terms of the journey of change, you can change your policies. You can make sure they're accessible, that your procedures in terms of recruitment and selection and training and development. You can create ring-fenced roles as well. But equally, then underneath of that, if you want that to have traction in the long term, you need to engage and think about all of the people in your organisation to understand how they might need to adjust their practice, how they need to support people, help them to navigate the culture within their organisations, and how work gets done, but also how career progression happens. But often it's the unspoken things about who you need to talk to or have lunch with, or the different networks that exist that enable people to be able to progress their careers. But also the unspoken things around your presentation of your skills and your CV, etc. And how you can find mentors both within the organisation but within your chosen field as well. And then as well, I think we'd really love to hear corporates make a long-term commitment to really changing perception, which is ultimately about values. So really engaging and thinking about bias within organisations, thinking about how bias is actually influencing those policies and practices within organisations, because that's where you see really long-term change and commitment. And confident, corporates being able to ring-fence roles, creating internships, creating, traineeships, creating networks of mentors that are cross fields. So in the legal field as an example, but engineering, medical field, where we do a lot of work with people with medical qualifications through our Building Bridges program, where we support people with those qualifications to be able to access employment within the NHS. Again, you need to have those networks and mentors, and it's the volunteer GPs that really help people to understand once they're in those placements about how to succeed, how to navigate that complex system. So perception it's not a simple request of corporates. It's a long-term commitment that is whole of organisation and a strategic commitment, and it operates at a number of different levels: policy, practice, and values. And you need all three to really be able to provide that sustainable support for women and all refugees, but particularly for women in terms of being able to succeed, but also partnership with those frontline organisations to be able to provide support around those structural barriers that women will face on their employment journey.
Really profound, thank you for that. I love the three tiers, the three levels of support that's required. I mean, Talent Beyond Boundaries is a refugee serving organisation, and when we were hiring, there was a line that we said people with lived experience are encouraged to apply. And then I looked up at the requirements and it said degree qualification. Well, there's a bit of a disconnect there, because people with lived experience may not have had the opportunity to complete their degrees. So there is an inherent sort of unintended exclusion and inequity, and I think it's a lot about thinking about what you actually want the outcome to be, rather than being symbolic and sort of projecting. I think that there are a lot of employers who are on that journey, but a lot more to come. Now, speaking of employers being a key stakeholder in this entire journey, I'll turn to you, Steve. So we've done work together, Refued and Talent Beyond Boundaries, but you do a lot of work as the employment lead on engaging employers and making access to refugees accessible. Can you tell us a little bit about the power of the role of employers and sort of any messages to employers who need what they need to be doing to make it more equitable for access?
Absolutely. Hi, so just to give you a quick overview in terms of what we do at Refued, just to set that in a little bit of context for you. Everything that we do as an organisation is geared towards supporting individuals who have had to flee their homes and come to the UK to be able to live the life that they want to live within the UK. And for about 99% of our clients that we support, that means going back to their profession or going back to their education, because of course these are the things that people always carry with them, no matter what they've had to leave behind before coming here. In terms of the way that we do that, I'll come on to the employment bit in just a second, but the two other programs are also really fundamental in tying into all of the employment work that we do, and that is language support and also reaccreditation / financial support. So in terms of language, obviously we know that this is the most fundamental stumbling block and barrier to overcome for anyone coming to the UK, but access to a high level of language support is not particularly common, and it is also prohibitively expensive to receive at a high level. So we support in order to ensure our clients can receive that. On top of that, we also have our reaccreditation program, which I just mentioned, and that speaks to some of the things that we've already referenced. So allowing highly skilled, ambitious individuals to retrain and reaccredit as a lawyer, as a doctor, as a nurse, as a HGV driver, all of these, again, prohibitively expensive requalification routes that without that financial capital, which is relatively small in the grand scheme of things, it might be a few £1,000s, it may be up to £10,000, but is a sum that is, once you are earning a regular salary, very easily repaid. We loan for that on an interest-free basis, and we can support. Then comes the employment side of things, and I think the interesting thing is when we look at the first two programs that I've just mentioned, on paper, if an individual has got all of the language skills that they need and is fully reaccredited as a lawyer or a doctor or a teacher or whatever it might be, then there should be absolutely no reason for them not to return to work at a level that is commensurate with their skills and experience. Unfortunately, we've had to set up the employment program because we were seeing that all of these fantastic clients who should have been walking into jobs and should have had employers biting their hands off to hire them were still on benefits 2 years after reaccrediting. So what we do is we work directly with employers, essentially within the capacity of a recruitment agent, if you like, but it's a little bit more targeted and a bit more wraparound, to ensure that the pathways exist between our clients into the people who are ultimately going to be making the decisions within the organizations. And there's a couple of different ways in which that we go about doing that, and that sort of follows the couple of different ways that I think are helpful for employers to kind of support in this work. So first of all, there's an awareness, obviously, that individuals are not necessarily going to have a UK work experience, and indeed in some cases are going to have a long gap when it comes to the last time they've worked in any setting. Having an understanding around that, having an understanding around the fact that qualifications that are not European does not mean they are irrelevant, and that skills tend to be pretty universal. Having an understanding and an education piece around that, and allowing there to be essentially a voice in the room, whether it's ours or whether it's advocates within the organisation, who aren't going to screen at an early process because this doctor hasn't worked within the last 4 years in a clinical setting. Well, they probably haven't forgotten how to be a neurosurgeon, to be honest. So that's one element. The other element is what you both referenced, which is this idea of mentoring. Not just because it expands the professional networks of our clients, and not just because it creates a sense of buy-in from the senior management within an organisation, and a sense of understanding of who the candidates are, but also because from a candidate perspective, it's hugely boosting for somebody's confidence. Obviously, I can't say this from any lived experience, but speaking to our candidates, one of the things that comes up again and again is a feeling that they are somehow out of the club or are sitting outside of the processes that are going on. And if we can set up a relationship between them and somebody in senior management where they can comfortably and confidently sit in a room and chat and share jokes, then suddenly the difference that makes when going into an interview room and speaking to a similar person from a different organisation can be literally life-changing, obviously, to that person and getting them their first job in the UK. There's probably a few other things I could look into, but I don't know if that's even answered your question, Marina, but as a starting
No,
point.
I think that's fantastic, and that on-the-ground experience is really powerful. What you said was, highly skilled, highly ambitious people, and what's really powerful is that we talk about all the partners that are involved in this, but at the core of it is the refugee, who is the agent of change, who is the person that's driving this, and without confidence and without flexibility, the barriers are far too difficult to overcome. I think that there's a role in employers and NGOs and governments giving permission to embed flexibilities in certain approaches. So if, for example, you do not have a degree qualification on a paper with you to say you're a software engineer, test it. There are coding tests, and I would put my salary on the fact that I would get a flat 0. I am not a software engineer. You need to be a good one to score 90 to get a look in. That is a way to really start thinking about how to meet criteria, how to meet the requirements, but doing it in a way that's flexible and is sensitive to the fact that displacement means that you are not on an equal footing in the first instance, but that does not mean that you're not of high potential and of huge ambition and huge skills. So a real sort of loss of opportunity not to take that on. Refugee Week is a celebration, and we've talked a lot about the barriers and the challenges that happen in day-to-day life for refugees, but also in the organisations that seek to sort of shift a system that is very rigid and very clunky. So I wonder, Renee, Steve, if you could share a story or a good outcome that you've sort of seen or know about from your organisations recently.
Well, apart from Omaima sitting right next to me, I think what we see in terms of the good outcomes, it's that long-term, team around an individual. It's very much what we've been talking about here. It's not just one mentor, it's a number of people that are able to walk alongside people in their journey and really working with them to understand what their goals are, and then helping them to understand, and unpack what are the pathway to achieving that, and linking them in with all the specialist support that they need to be able to achieve that. I was just reading through a case study in preparation for today, and we've recently worked with a woman who is a journalist and had arrived in the UK a number of years ago and really struggled, similar really to what you were saying, Omaima, about, really lost confidence by the time she'd come to us, and really and not understanding why she wasn't getting that first foothold. And actually, in the first instance, when we were speaking with her and we saw that, the barrier was around UK experience, she actually first got an internship in retail to really get that understanding of how UK workplaces work. That was short. It really boosted her confidence. And then from there, she then got a mentorship with the Financial Times, and then she was flying. And it wasn't long after that then actually she got her first paid role. But it was really those building blocks of really, as you say, people are the experts of their own experience and their own aspiration. And then working with them just to really support and be with them in the highs and lows. It's a zigzag. It's never going to be straightforward. But really then thinking through what's the learning at each stage, and how we can support them together as teams around the individual, I think, is the key.
From our perspective, I can give two brief examples which I think give a really good illustration of how this can work in two quite different ways and in two quite different scales. So the first being a new client of ours, Andre, who has recently left Ukraine and is currently in Bulgaria, coming over to the UK. We've partnered recently with an organisation called Airfin, and they, because they want to support this piece of work, have, rather than getting candidates to fill pre-existing vacancies, they've actually created these launchpad roles where they've said, bring us candidates who are skilled, and we will fit those skills into our organisation, exactly viewing or exactly echoing what we were saying before as skills being universal. And what was meant to just be an introductory call for them to say hi, they ended up offering Andre the job on the call because they were obviously completely blown away. So I think that's one really inspiring way of doing it on an individual basis, maybe a little bit more tricky to scale up when we're looking at big institutions and hiring 50 or 100 people at a time. I think to answer that particular concern, probably the NHS nursing programme that Talent Beyond Boundaries and Refued have been working on together over the past year or so, wherein nurses who are at different stages of their requalification and registration to the NMC, the Nursing and Midwifery Council in the UK, are supported both to achieve the language exams that they need, also given a return to work kind of crash course in the NHS, and then crucially supported with work that they can do even if they haven't fully registered, but which will allow them to work within an NHS setting as a healthcare assistant. I think these sort of programs that are really sensitive to the individual needs, and instead of seeing a barrier of somebody not having full registration or not having their language exams, actively look at structured ways that individuals can be supported to have those successes, knowing that in terms of longevity, it will ultimately result in many more qualified nurses, which is obviously great for the individuals, but it's good for the health service as well. It is this idea of looking at the individuals we're putting through. It sounds like a horrible term, but as commercial assets that are always going to favour and add to the organisation if the training and the patience is there in the first place.
So the win-win. I think we need to take a little pause to shout out to DLA Piper for creating this space, for creating opportunities, and for, I guess, supporting the space and the research for this role that Omaima has so incredibly done and sort of given voice. As you were writing this, you wanted to, I guess, raise some of these barriers, but what is your hope for what's to come and how this report is disseminated and change is made?
So yes, in addition to highlighting the barriers that facing women refugees and affect their efforts to find employment, I really wanted this report to send the message that women refugees should be seen as benefit opportunities, not burden. They have skills, they have experiences. I believe it's really, really important to focus or to ask the right questions instead of focus on our vulnerability or what the basic needs. It's important to work toward identifying our skills and added benefits. And that the fact that we can give and we can achieve and we can help organizations and businesses to be more responsible and more engaged. And I am confident to share my experience with DLA Piper, who I believe a thought leader in this area and really believe in the rights holder engagement. So I believe that my lived experience, even though I experienced so many unpleasant things, but I think I learned a lot and I developed an insight and perspective that not everyone has, and this is what helped me to contribute toward the success of a number of pro bono projects run by DLA Piper. For example, our legal educational program for refugees, Know Your Rights, and Women in Law for Women Refugees, which is the first mentoring, professional mentoring program, like sensitive to the needs of women refugees, and run and delivered by female lawyers and legal professionals at the firm. The program I designed the program and I helped managing it, and it was huge success because of the perspective I have on it. And I am so grateful for the opportunity from DLA Piper, but I also believe that my lived experience and my background helped me to contribute toward making my employer responsible business. And this is just an example. I think there are so many things that women refugees can help employers and businesses to achieve. It is just for us to realize that they can help to create like recovery-focused, hopeful and positive culture in the organization that can help organizations to be more inclusive. I feel within the team when I talking to everyone about my experience, the time I needed to learn English and how I used to work in completely different system in Libya and how I was supported by my family and how I managed to adapt to my new situation. I feel that I am giving motivation to everyone in the team. I feel that I am inspiring people to challenge themselves, to improve their skills, to go out of the comfort zone. So I really wish through highlighting the barriers that's facing women refugees and the problem or the gap in the services and the amount of skills and knowledge those women have, but they don't use it, sending just a message about the importance of investing on them.
I think what's really profound is that being a refugee is not an identity, it's a circumstance. But that circumstance becomes part of your identity, which then attracts all these barriers. And when building or talking about refugee programs, refugees must be in the room. And if there is any example of that, it's Amima here today and what you've been able to achieve. And it's not even about projecting these barriers, but being part of the solution as well, because there is a level of trust in the community that is overcoming some incredible challenges. So thank you for your work, and your report is really shining a light on what you've had to overcome to get to this point, but the intangible benefits of your motivation and your inspiration are incredible. So on that note, I think we've got a few minutes to open the floor to questions. Does anybody have any questions? I think CJ's got a roaming mic.
Yeah. Right there.
Thank you so much, everyone. That was really, really fascinating. If to Renee and Steve, I suppose, if you were to say two things to corporates, I was saying to Amina and Marina before that what we've been trying to do at DLA is really to encourage our commercial clients really engage with refugee employment. And I think if you were to say like one big takeaway to commercial clients, what's one thing that they can change in their HR systems? Because a lot of this work goes on in pro bono teams and D&I, but ultimately it's HR teams that have to make those changes and those decisions. So what would you say is one thing that they can change and do to try and help hire refugee women?
policies. So have a look at your policies, look at them for bias. So there's some of the things that Marina spoke about before in terms of qualifications, but also about processes. So who's involved in those processes, who's making decisions about appointments, shaping roles, making those sorts of decisions. Think about the kinds of positive action that you can take, about ring-fencing roles, but also creating internships and the kind of support that HR teams can provide to other teams within the organisation to sustain those opportunities as well. So for me, HR teams are like nerve centres around people and culture. So they can do a lot to change, what I was talking about earlier around policies, around practice and feeding back what's working and what's not, but also ultimately around the values that are informing how people are treated and welcomed into the organisation and supported to stay there as well.
Yeah, I think similarly, we'll often see a lot of organisations come to us with great intentions but without the ability to kind of practically deliver, and I think that's because they will often approach recruiting our clients from quite a fragmented point of view, where the D&I team will approach us but the head of talent isn't on the call, and ultimately unless we've got not just people from the HR and recruiting team but at the most senior level involved from the top down, then from my experience anyway, it's where we tend to hit barriers. On top of that, depending on what the profession is, so obviously I referenced the nursing program earlier, but I think this can apply to engineering, accounting, law, and a myriad of other professions besides. Do you have a returners program? If you can set up a grad scheme, then you can set up a returners program, and it is the infrastructure. So a returners program, like something in place to support people who have had a career but have taken a long gap and are now looking to return to their career. Obviously, exactly as Marina references before, the term refugee here is irrelevant because we have thousands of people in this country who have taken long career breaks and who have the skills and want to go back. So we should be able to directly just feed into that slipstream and use that exact same practice.
And just to echo, some companies do that for return service people, to women returning to the workforce, offenders, ex-offenders. So where, for whatever reason, you're taking a gap, being a refugee is taking a gap because of a circumstance. And so that is the way to fit rather than a graduate program, which can often be quite damaging, I imagine, to confidence if you are a professional of 20 years and you're being taught something quite fundamental, even though it is in a new context. I think there was a question down the front here.
Thank you so much for a very enlightening panel. I wondered, any of you, if you wanted to shed some light on cultural differences and how we can support, because I mean, everyone says the special relationship between the US and the UK, and I moved here and I was like, wow, everything is very different. And it's not just the overuse of yous. So I wonder, culturally it's a very different place. There's pubs everywhere. How do we support refugees that are coming into our workforce in a professional but cultural way?
Great question, Emima. I think this was.
Thank you so much for your question. This is a very important question, and this is one of the main findings of our report about barriers facing women refugees' integration into the labor market. So, look, moving from or between two Western countries is a big thing. What about moving, for example, from Middle East, from any of Asia's country to the UK? Is kind of going to the completely different planet. Everything is different. The way people speak, the way the people react toward things, the way you are thinking, especially as women. And here I focus on women because cultural differences can affect everyone, but with women it's more harder than men because you are coming, for example, I'm giving myself as an example, I'm coming from a male-dominated society. I am coming from a culture where gender inequality is a normal thing, where a woman and a wife has to play a certain role within the family. And when you are a women refugee in a different country, you need to deal with so many things, including including the impact of distributed professional developing due to the traditional gender roles and your identity as women as well, in addition to being refugee or Muslim or being from a certain background. So whether in the interviews, whether in the home office when you are handling your case, you are a woman, sometimes dealing with male, you are not comfortable speaking or open up to them. You feel like shy when it comes to certain things. You have responsibilities or roles that you need to play, maybe other people won't be able to. You have a way to raise your children, which is completely different about what's going on here. This leads so many women to sacrifice opportunities and things just to keep their families, for example. The way you dress, the way you shake your hands with people, the way you speak, it might be very difficult. For example, here it's normal for a male colleague to come and say hi and hug you. Well, it's culturally unaccepted, and you feel that how can I react in this position? Or when you are interviewed by a male and you were like victim of a discrimination in this interview, but you take it, you don't know how to deal with this. Sometimes maybe you take it normal because this is something you used to, but it's wrong. You can complain. You can say this is wrong. The lack of understanding of the culture in the host country and what women bring with them from their home country is something need to be further investigated and highlighted. And I believe it's really important within the recruitment process as well to take account on these cultural differences and sensitivity and background. So yeah.
It's a really great point. I think core to that is, again, the voice of the refugee in a lot of this. So in some of our programming, what we completely took for granted was, and it stood out in your report as well, was budgeting, right? We have a lot of candidates who come from a high inflation background, and you need to spend your money today because it's worth 25% less tomorrow. And we literally had a candidate who bought, not exaggerating, a lifetime supply of toothbrushes, because at that point it was worth, like it was, you could buy it and you will need it and it's not going to go off, but you can't do that in the UK. Do not buy a lifetime supply of toothbrushes from Boots. You have to budget, and I think it's something that's really taken for granted, particularly some of our younger female nurses who have not had that in their mindset, in their education, in their familial responsibilities. So I think really for at least the work that we do, and I'm sure it is for Refugee Council and Refued, it's really about taking on the feedback and then projecting it to your next partner. So projecting it onto and disseminating that to your next employer to say, please ask if you should shake a hand. We have one candidate who cannot be in a room that's closed with a man if the door is closed. But if you open the door, she's more comfortable if her back is towards us or she's closest to... Just small sensitivities that need to be built into a policy of recruitment that can stem from this incredible group of women, but can translate to women who have experienced some sort of violence and might want that as an option, whether they were a refugee or not. And I think that there's a real possibility to create movement of change to make the whole process equitable. It should not just be for refugee women, it should be for all Remainers. Of course, tailored support for integration for refugee women is specific, but the systemic changes can really sort of build out. I'm just mindful of time and a bar that's waiting and some drinks on this hot day. So I'm going to end with a call to action, and this was summarised and come up together with Amima. So there are 4 key stakeholders who are part of any solution as we talk about refugee employment. So the first is to employers. The call to action is to train, to mentor, to hire, to integrate, and to change your policies to make sure they align with your values. To NGOs, tailor support, advocate for candidates, and have them in the room. The refugee voice is so important in program development. For civil society, question biases that you may be used to, participate and speak, talk about this event, talk about the poem that may have moved you, talk about Refugee Week and incredible colleagues that you meet along the way, and give confidence to this as a topic. And finally, to funders. To Renee's point, multi-year funding that is unrestricted is the most powerful tool to making systemic change. Restricted funding for something that someone in an office has determined is what's necessary is deeply, deeply ineffective and will not give lasting change. You must trust the organisations who are on the ground to determine what is powerful and what will bring about change. And on that, I might pass to Amaima for a final word. Is there anything that you would like to say to close this event?
I just would like to thank all of you for all the information and the insights you shared today. And as I always say, that it's really important to invest and to believe in women refugees. I believe this is the only way to the inclusion and to the integration of future generation. It's also important to create peaceful societies and inclusive organizations based on the shared value and the respect of diversity. Yes, there are so many women there, just need opportunities, just need someone to believe on them. And I hope by the findings and the outcomes of the report that we published this week in the Refugee Day or Week, and with the insights of our amazing panelists today, we managed to send this message, and this is understood. Hopefully everyone enjoyed the conversation today, and thanks again.